Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice little three-game Major League Baseball slate. Keep in mind, this slate starts at 3 o'clock, and we won't get the lineups for the two late games until after it locks, so do keep that in mind today. With that said, we do have some core plays in William Contreras and Rice Hoskins, and pitching is going to be rough today. We really don't have a lot of great pitching options on the slate, so I think it's going to be a relatively good batting slate for this one. So let's go ahead and get into this one here. So first of all, for pitchers, we'll look at Hunter Brown. Now, Brown is not the most expensive option today, but he is the best upside guy as he has 6 straight solid games with 4 straight with a win. He also has only given up 5 total earned runs in those 6 games, and one of those games, he had 3 earned runs given up. He's got a favorable matchup here. He's got the best K rate on the slate. Probably Houston uh, looks the best when it comes to the pitching today, and so he's got the best K rate as well. So I like his upside here quite a bit. The other guys to consider here as GPP plays will be Gore, being one of them for Washington against the Mets. He has struggled in 3 of the last 5 starts, including a game versus the Mets, but he has good upside as a GPP play today. Though he is the most expensive play, so he is contrarian, though he will be the second most owned player on the slate. The other guy that will be relatively high owned would be David Peterson. In 3 of his past 5 starts, he's been decent. He hasn't got a high ceiling, but he does have some upside here. The Nationals will probably score a run or two on him, but he has enough upside on a tiny slate. I don't necessarily think he has super high winning potential because I think this game could be factored later in the game, as both teams do have some guys that have some potential against the bullpens. Their other 3 pitchers are really rough situations, but Wilson does have some extreme Hail Mary type situational upside, as he does have a good ceiling. He can score over 20 fantasy points in certain situations, and Colorado is a pretty terrible team, but he has a super low floor as well. So he's a boomer bust play or a Hail Mary play, however you want to look at it, and only because he's just dirt cheap. And he'll be the 4th highest owned player on the slate, likely. Looking at our catchers today, William Contreras does jump off the page as the best overall upside guy. He does have good metrics today. I think he has good potential for a solid game here, and this game being in Colorado really gives him gives him a boost. He's hit the ball really well this season, and he has a lot of potential in this game against the Rockies. The other options to consider today, the top owned options will be Contreras and Yanir Diaz, and then a low owned upside guy will be Francisco Alvarez. I do think Alvarez is probably the best cheap overall guy. And then, Kirk would be kind of a Hail Mary play, and Yanir Diaz is another, contrarian. He's a top owned guy, but he does have contrarian upside on the slate. Looking at first base, this is a fairly deep position today, especially here on DraftKings, where Rice Hoskins does look really good, though. So he's a core play because he has home run potential today. He has been inconsistent this season because of the batting average. He's hitting the ball pretty well lately. He does strike out some, but he does have good upside on the slate. So this matchup being really solid for him gives him a lot of potential. You could also look at him as the top owned player, but Vlad Jr. will also be up there, and then some low owned upside guys would be Pete Alonso and JD Martinez. Uh, Basically, all 4 of those guys have some good potential today, but you could even look at Spencer Horwitz as a kind of a contrarian play. Looking at second base, we do like Jose Altuve pretty good today. He doesn't have as good of metrics as I typically like for him, but he is in a small slate like this. He's going to have the most upside from when it comes to his more pricey options. He's also got the top ownership on the slate, but Monastero for Milwaukee looks very interesting today. He doesn't play a lot, but when he does play, he has been scoring fantasy points, and he's had, I think, 5 or 6 straight games with a hit, so he does have some potential today, especially this game being in Colorado. Though he is a very risky play, he is dirt cheap, and he's got some really good. He also can play at second or third base, which gives him some utility today. And he does have some of the better metrics of any of the players on the slate at this particular position. It's a fairly weak position today. So the top owned guys will be Altuve, Montestero, and then for Washington, Vargas. And then the low owned upside guy, it would be Jose Iglesias, but he's pretty risky on this one. Spencer Horwitz can also play at this position, just to keep that in mind. Looking at third base, McMahon does jump off the page as the top overall play, only because he's just been really good. but I don't like Colorado much beyond him, so he's a good one-off play, but he's not a must-play by any stretch of imagination. Then we'll look at Joey Ortiz for Milwaukee. If he does end up playing today, which he is currently day to day, then he would be somebody I would consider, though he's priced up a lot, so that does make it hard to roster him. He definitely looks a lot better on FanDuel. But then Alex Bregman, Andrew Montesero, and Mark Vientos all look okay today. But Ortiz, Bregman, and Montesero will be the top owned plays at this position, and then Mark Vientos will be that low owned upside guy. Looking at our shortstops today, uh, we do have some interesting plays here with Willy Adames, Francisco Lindor, and Bo Bichette. All three of these guys are pretty similarly priced. I mean, there's a little bit of difference here, but Adames does jump off the page being this game is in Colorado, though he has struggled lately. He's only had a couple, he hadn't had a hit in, 7 games now. But his metrics here are really good. But you don't have to play him because he's a little bit pricier than Lindor, who's also been pretty good lately. Lindor has absolutely been hitting the ball very well with lots of multi-hit games. And this matchup is very good for him, so he has good potential here. And he's also dominated Washington this season. He was very close to being a core play for me. It's just this position's relatively deep today. With Bo Bichette also, he has struggled this season, but he's hitting the ball better the last week or so he definitely has some potential as well. But Lindor, Adames, and Bichette will be the top owned guys, and the low owned upside guy with Jeremy Pena. But Vargas for Washington also has some potential today. But I'm definitely kind of liking Lindor the best overall. Looking at the outfielders, Yelich, Thomas, Jones, and Alvarez are the top 4 plays when it comes to the pricey options. And then Chorio, Blackman, Cave, and Nemo are the secondary plays. Springer, Martinez, and Harold Ramirez and Bader all have some utility today. But as for top ownership, Jackson Chorio, Jordan Alvarez, Nolan Jones, and Charlie Blackman, and also Nemo, Taylor, Harold Ramirez, and Jake Myers. I think Brandon Nemo definitely looks like one of my favorite plays on the slate, and I think JD Martinez is also kind of interesting. The thing is that I do like those guys, but they are in a tough matchup for pitching purposes at least, against Gore. But I don't think Gore is a great play necessarily, so I think you can mix in a couple of Mets and still feel pretty good about it. But the low owned upside guys at this position would be JD Martinez, Blake Perkins, Lane Thomas, Harrison Bader, Varsho, and Jacob Young. Though I am probably gonna steer away from the Washington Nationals for the most part, outside of maybe Thomas or sorry, just Thomas. Looking at the stacks today, Milwaukee is going to be the top overall stack on the slate, as they do have the best upside on this one. Obviously, with Adames, Hoskins, and then and and Contreras all being the top overall plays here. I do think that Yelich has some utility, though he's fairly expensive, and Ortiz, if he draws a start today, definitely has some potential. Montesero, as I mentioned, he's a dirt cheap play that can give you a lot of potential to move around. With the pricing of the pitchers being relatively decent, you can pretty much mix and match whatever players you want and then just stack in the pitchers later. But the second best expected run total will be Colorado, but the only guys I really like here are McMahon and Toglia. This team is kind of rough today. I know Nolan Jones does kind of look okay today, as does Blackman, but I think that those two guys are probably the top level guy. If I was going to use anybody, it would just be McMahon, but you can definitely, especially in cash games, I would only use McMahon at the most. Looking at Houston as the third best team to stack today, Alvarez, Diaz, Myers are the top 3 players here. I know Altuve and Bregman are kind of contrarian today, and Pena is as well. And then kind of a Hail Mary play that you could utilize at this position if he draws a start would be Salazar at catcher, but I don't know if he'll end up playing today or not, but he might. So we'll have to wait and see about that. For the next team would be the Mets with Martinez, Lindor, Nemo, Alonso, Vientos, and Iglesias, all looking decent today in a tough matchup. So this is going to be a boomer bust team. This is definitely going to be the GPP team to stack up because they have a lot of good upside potential based on metrics, but they are a little bit risky in a tougher matchup from pitching perspective. For Washington, I mean, Abrams, Thomas, Senzel, and Wood look okay today. That's not a great stack, but it's definitely an interesting one today, though it doesn't have a lot of upside. I do think that they score a couple runs, though. And then Toronto has the weakest stack today. Vlad Jr. is day to day, but if he draws a start today, he'll be in play. If he doesn't, then obviously you don't want to utilize him. Spencer Horwitz does look interesting, though he does carry some risk here. Justin Turner does look interesting as well, but he's high risk, high reward. And then Jansen, if he ends up, which he may not end up be playing today, it's hard to say. Oh, he's on the paternity list, so I guess he won't be here today. He would have some utility if he played here, so that would give Kirk the ball, which I think he'll have some potential on the slate at this position. So, with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments, questions,